Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole because we like to go into topics more deeply. And we're coming to you today, as usual, from the Manhattan Neighborhood Network studios, and I have as a guest Dyandria. Thank you, Dyandria, for joining us here in New York City.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me on your show. It's always very interesting topics, from 9/11 inside job to corruption in the medical industry. So
Right.
I'm very happy to be here.
I know, and we've done so many shows together. I remember one we did on milk. I didn't know very much about it, but you were game to go on and talk about the importance of good health.
Exactly.
I had particularly wanted to invite you back, not realizing how many months have gone by since we've done a show, because on my YouTube account, all of a sudden I realized there's something called Insight, and you can get information about who's watching your show. And it turns out, I hadn't paid attention to this or even known it existed, that for many months now, one show that you and I did together when I was first starting to live stream from my little apartment in Gramercy Park is getting 1,500 hits a day now. You're now my top show. It's over 100,000 hits. And as I looked at it and then I found out that you have viewers in France, you have viewers in Brazil. When we were setting up for the show, I said, I always like the New York skyline, New York City. But this background sort of had a feeling of Hong Kong. So it shows how what we're doing here in New York City, now thanks to the internet, is going all over. So your story that's so well known here with the public access producers and in this community of alternative media is now a message that's reverberating everywhere.
Yeah.
And so what I did was, there was a show that I always loved, which was with my niece, Natasha.
Yes, that's my favorite show.
Wasn't that a great
Yes.
show? I mean, she had come to town, and she was maybe going to come by with her mother, and then she said, no, I want to see Auntie Paula by myself.
Which was perfect.
Yes, she had some kind of insight. And then she just jumped in. I said, how would you like to do a show? You be the host.
And she was hosting that show.
She was,
Yeah.
and she did a great job.
She did.
And
she was only 18 at the time.
I know. So, but the thing is, that show wasn't doing well. It was just sort of languishing on my YouTube site. So because yours was doing really well, I did something, and I'll show it to you later, called annotations, where you can sort of lay in this link right on the visuals of you and me talking with this sort of funky show. Really, I was just getting used to it, and Victor was calling in, and I was wondering if that's a real caller, and who's responding to the streaming going out over the internet. So what I did was I linked it to this successful show of yours, and sure enough, you're getting now 60% of my hits, because I'm getting about 4,000 a day, and she's now getting almost 10%.
Wow.
Which is great. And then she did 2 shows, and the second one was about spirituality and faith.
Right.
And I was crying behind the switcher.
It was
on that
very
show.
touching. And when Natasha herself was crying, it was just heart-wrenching. She's such a sweet girl.
For viewers who don't know your story, can you kind of encapsulate? I know you've told it a million times.
I started programming in 1997 because I was entrapped in a cover-up involving my former husband, who had abused my daughter. And instead of protecting my daughter, the whole system protected him, and that's because he worked for the system. He was a New York City detective for 20 years, and his father was a detective for 35 years, and his grandfather as well. So I started the program because the media wouldn't cover these kind of stories. I later find out because it's so prevalent, and now that we're on the internet, if you just, I don't know if you have my name up here, but if anybody just Googles my first name, you don't even need my last name, D like in David, Y-A-N-D-R-I-A, there's about 100 pages. And on YouTube and Blip TV and MySpace, I have been getting emails from people from other countries. So I know what you're saying is in fact true, and they're having the same problems we have in the court system here over there.
They're having a lot of problems, I know, in England. There's a lot of activists working there.
Yeah.
It's really...
I mean, Child Protective Service problems.
It's just so heart-wrenching because you're hearing about, I mean, I heard about in San Bernardino something called Operation Sunrise, where they came through and they took 39 children at 4 o'clock in the morning, put them in the system. Ostensibly, they're taking them away from poor families, so they're going to put them into, you know, families of more means that are supposed to give the children more opportunities. But it's very questionable where they're going.
Yeah, well, I've studied this since 1997, and they're not targeting any specific group of people.
That's true, because your child had the best.
Yes, and in my neighborhood, at the same period of time in the beginning when all this happened, 2 other children were taken. So they were people of means.
Right.
And also, the majority of children in the system are white, and nobody seems to be aware of that when they live in inner cities where you see the majority of minorities. It's actually quite the opposite. When you go all across the board, from California to the east to the west coast, north to south, it's the majority of children in the system are white.
Why is that?
And they have... I guess because there's more white people. I would think because there's more Caucasians.
Right.
But the way children get in there, nobody does any targeting. The way children get in there, I have on YouTube and MySpace also a senator talking about how they tried to take his kid, but because he knew the law, they weren't able to get into the house.
So if they didn't know the law, they would have let them in?
Oh, yeah.
They would just
Exactly. Exactly.
So they're kind of preying on ignorance, too.
Yes, they are.
Is there anything like a legal aid for people who...
Yes, they work with the system, so they work against you.
The legal aid works against you.
Yes.
So really, children are being taken away from loving parents.
Yes. Yes.
Because there's money to be made from it, right?
Yes. There's the family courts are growing in size. It's huge. And the majority of cases in there, those children never belonged in there. Fathers who are batterers are getting custody 70% of the time in contested custody cases. And why would court systems give children to batterers? Because now the child's going to become slow. They're going to probably lean on drugs. Then they will lose their children. It feeds also the prison system. It's creating a dysfunctional society.
The two growing economies in our dreadful time, economic time, is medicine and prisons.
Right.
It's actually money to be made from that. And you would think that in a healthier society, you would not have that be a lucrative business.
Exactly.
I mean, in Ayurveda and Indian medicine, it said that the first tenet is that the doctor doesn't make money from the disease.
Well, that's the way it was in this country years ago. The doctor was a poor man, and he would go to service you in your home and charge.
People would take care of him, give him pies and feed him, and because you were really happy that to have that information.
Speaking of medicine, since we got in that subject, why don't you tell your viewers about this?
Yes, this book that I have up here is Cancer is a Fungus, and this book is, or maybe get it with the camera over there. Cancer is a Fungus, and this is by Tullio Simoncini. Can you zoom in there? Yeah, I'll hold that up. And he's an oncologist, an Italian oncologist, who noticed many, many years ago that he was in medical school, and he had this revelation when they said nobody knows the cause of cancer, and it sort of set something off in him, kind of like an internal challenge. What do you mean nobody can figure out the cause of cancer? That couldn't be right. And so years went by, and he started to discover that it was a fungus. And he used simple antifungal methods like baking soda, or in the case of skin cancer, iodine, so that you attack the colonies, the fungus colonies, fungal colonies. And he said it's like a spider web. If you shake one part of the spider web, then the other parts will sort of retreat. It will kind of, say if the baking soda solution is attacking one part of the tumor, it's actually, there's fungus other places. So unless you can kind of knock it all out, it will retreat. And that's why it takes a certain amount of skill. But he was so poorly received with his work that I think he even stopped practicing for a while, went back to school, got a degree in philosophy, because he felt that if he could argue this philosophically, using like the philosophy of science, he would make more headway. So he was persistent. The years have gone on. He has people who have survived terminal diseases, and I'm hoping he'll come to New York.
This has been going on for quite a while. There was a doctor who cured, I believe it was breast cancer, back in the 70s, and he lost his license because the cancer industry is a thriving industry. As you mentioned, growing industries such as prisons and child protective services is also a rapidly growing industry. So is cancer, and they don't want, it's like Kevin Trudeau's book, The Cures They Don't Want You to Know About. Everything in that book is how you can cure cancers homeopathically. So he went to the Bahamas, where they permitted him to continue with his research, and there were so many people there saying they had the breast cancer, and this doctor had cured them.
Yeah.
They didn't need to be amputated, you know.
Well, there's if it is a fungus, then there's different ways of, you could probably have different methods that would work, but probably the most exciting thing that he did, because he is a researcher, or he's sensitive to science. He's big on science, and he's big on the scientific method. So he goes to the original studies of what they say, as opposed to how those studies are written up that can kind of spin it in a different way. And so what he discovered is that candida is not an opportunistic function that sets in as a result of the growing debilitation as the cancer progresses, but that according to DNA samples, it is the cancer. It actually is this particular fungus that has a DNA signature.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and that was a real accomplishment, because then you can kind of understand how the other methods might work. Now, my understanding is most of the doctors do get their licenses back, but it's a big struggle in court. Sure. And you know all about court struggles.
Right.
So the question I want to ask you now is, because I've watched the comments and things, and I've heard, in the Manhattan Neighborhood Network community, yours was a huge struggle for many years. I mean, you were even without charge in prison, in jail for 3 years.
Mine is the worst case.
Would you have done it all over?
Oh, absolutely. I spent 3 years in jail, sitting in a little cell, able to go outside for 1 hour a day on concrete. And of course I would do it all over again, because I was there because I was trying to protect my daughter. How could I look at myself into the mirror if I said, oh, jail, forget it, I'm not going there. I'd rather be nice and safe and continue.
Because that's what a lot of mothers do. They just give up.
That's what most of them do.
They say, we can't fight City Hall.
Yeah, that's what most of them do. But you can fight, and you can be successful. I had 2 assistant attorneys asked to resign from the Manhattan DA's office. I had 4 judges recuse themselves. I've had caseworkers that were honest, working for Child Protective Services, leave when they saw my case. They were outraged. They realized at that point they weren't working for a system that was there to protect children, but quite the opposite.
So they did something else in life?
Yeah, they ended up, one fellow went to probation, and I forgot what the other woman did.
But this is the same thing in medicine. Some doctors are stopping to practice medicine rather than go along with the AMA union rules that says if they've tried everything that they're allowed to do under the radiation and chemotherapy model and it doesn't work, they can't even suggest to the patient to go out and try elsewhere.
That's right.
Let alone do the therapy. They can't even suggest that there's other methods possible.
Right.
So rather than be in that moral dilemma, they stop practicing medicine, which to me is it's a travesty. All that education, all that experience, and then they have to do another profession
Isn't
because
it
they
something?
morally can't handle it.
Do you know that there are lawyers who passed the bar and were accepted, who quit and ended up doing something else? And you have to understand, there's a lot of schooling you had to go through,
I know.
a lot of expense. But when they saw how corrupt the system really is, they said, oh, no, this isn't.
So even though today you're not communicating with your daughter, you still say you'd go through it again?
Yes, because I believe that God has everything for a reason. From 1997, when this happened to me, I started to pay attention to my inner voice, as Oprah always talks about, the inner voice.
Right.
That's God.
Right.
That's God speaking and directing you to do things. And I used to fight it. But then I went with the flow. And part of that was to keep bashing at them. Kathy O'Brien says, go at them. She said, at one time, I didn't know where to run and I didn't know where to hide. And then I figured it out. Go at them. So if everybody did what I was doing and am doing, we'd have a much better world.
Okay, if everybody did it. Now, what is it like? Because oftentimes I've taken certain steps, like with the 9/11 truth, where people were saying, oh, you can't say this, or some people that were saying things were anonymous. And then I would say it, and I'd show myself, and here's my address, and like nothing's happening. But the thing is, if others don't join along, then it makes it a little bit difficult.
It's crazy. Whenever people say, oh, gee, are you going to mention those names? The person who hosted the show where my daughter was on with me, after we did the show, he got very nervous, and he said to me, maybe we shouldn't air this show because, you named all those names.
Right.
Well, that's the whole idea.
Right.
Naming names is crucial.
Hey, and you know something else about naming names? Those people might want their names to be named because whoever's telling them to do what they don't want to do, really.
You're right.
They're saying, look, they're naming my name.
Right.
So I can't keep doing this anymore.
Well, that's why those judges recused themselves off of my case, because because of the publicity. And they even admitted it in writing. I had one judge actually write down, because of my TV shows, she's recusing herself. Because if a person is victimized by that particular judge and they Google their name, I come up.
Oh, really?
Yes, because the Daily News did an article, and so that's linked with their names are mentioned in the Daily News. The Village Voice did an article. A whole lot of other papers did articles, but they were smaller papers, and so I don't see them on YouTube. But they show up when they are Googled. I come, so then they see what they had done to me, and now they're aware. And I Googled their names and found out they harmed some. Helen C. Sturm, in particular, used to be a prosecutor, and she actually used to take evidence and conceal it that showed that the person was innocent. She was in the law journal.
You mean conceal it like when it was Exhibit A, Exhibit B, like where's Exhibit C?
Yeah, exactly.
It was already entered into the court?
It wasn't entered.
It wasn't entered,
It
so
was
she
hidden.
saw to it. It was hidden, yeah. Wow.
And witnesses who would come forth weren't called into court, to prove that the person was innocent. And it was written up in the law journal. I was like, wow.
Well, I also remember when I first met you, when I first met Dyandria, because this is a spiritual show, I was in India and I was studying about the miracles and particularly about the healings. Also about pedophilia. I was trying to understand why big gurus, were doing this. So I can be attracted to bleak topics, but the feeling is that if you can go into a dark topic and resolve it, then you can have the joy and the love and the happiness that you're looking for. So I had been to holy spots, I'd been reading books, I visited masters alive and dead, and sometimes when you're just giving up. All of a sudden you'll go someplace, to some temple. It could be Muslim or Hindu or just a place of faith where people are focusing, and you just get some uplifting energy. And sometimes you're protected just with rest. You can just rest. And I remember when I came into MNN, it was a little scary because I was doing my show. I'd been gone for 4 years. And I wanted to learn the Express Studio. So after my time was over and someone else came in, I'd ask if I could stay and watch them. Well, they'd always say no because everybody's nervous. But one person let me stay, and that was Dean Lauren. So he said, just don't say anything, and I was in the back. And then more people came in, and I realized, it took me a while to remember who it was. It was you, because I remembered your voice. It was Gisela Weishaus, because I remember there was an Auschwitz survivor. And there was another man, and I bet you it was Joe. Because Joe told me later.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't?
That day, no, it was a David Pachter. He was a school teacher that was placed in the rubber room because he was complaining that the high school students had music classes deleted from the curriculum. That's why.
Well, whatever it was, I went into like this profound meditation or rest. It was just like I went into another zone. And afterwards, I remember because
David?
From what I caught,
yeah,
I was just like overwhelmed at the information that was going out. And he said, "You have no idea how corrupt this city is."
Yeah.
And I was coming from this point of, how do you bring spiritual light in there? And then I got to know you, and then you told me that Conversations with God is something that you connected with, that book, that somebody illegally gave you that book in jail.
Yes.
And that gave you the confidence to keep on going.
Yeah, I spent most of my time in the law library. In fact, I was certified 3 times as a paralegal. But I would go when I first entered there, I'd sit over the typewriter and I'd cry so much that the tears were just flowing, and it was flooding the typewriter. So the woman, so a person who worked for the system, a civilian, said, "You know what, I've been watching you every day." It was about 3 months later. She approached me. She says, "I could tell you just don't belong here." And so she said, "Please tell me your story." So I told her my story. And that's when she handed me the book. She said, and I couldn't put it down. I said, "This is so real. The Bible is not real." I actually read the Bible cover to cover. It's filled with incest. It's horrible. It's a horrible book, slaughtering animals, and it's a book of sickness. And
your background, by the way, is part Greek, right?
Yes.
And the Greeks from Thessalonica?
I asked my uncle, and I have it written down, but I can't remember the town.
More about that, because I think throughout the ages, people have been wanting to have a more accurate record of the great people, because you weren't denying Jesus. It was just some of the recordings.
I just don't believe he's God.
Yeah,
but I don't believe he said he was God. I believe what he was saying was that inner voice, God is in me and God is in you.
But you can see how they can write up the studies differently, just like Simoncini is discovering that the actual researchers, if you go back and look at their research and look at what they discovered and what they wrote down, then somebody interprets those.
Right.
And then you come to a different conclusion.
Well, everybody knows the Bible was altered.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
The original teachings, but that's what he was trying to say. He was a man of love and peace. He was like a high hippie. He was a beautiful person. I mean, and his spirituality reached everybody. I mean, he's the most popular person in the world. And what they did is by crucifying him, made him the most popular person in the world. And that's what happened to me. Why there's 100 pages on me is because by placing me in jail, I got all this publicity. People, I remember I was in jail and some woman contacted me from upstate New York, and I said, how did you know about me? I'm sitting in Rikers Island.
Yeah.
It's a little cubbyhole. I'm a secret prisoner. I'm under a civil contempt, so I don't have a record. So no, how did you find out? And it was a Daily News article, because that was done while I was in jail, and went from coast to coast. She said, oh, some woman in, I forgot the state. It's next to Arizona. It wasn't Arizona.
New Mexico?
Nevada. She said, some woman in Nevada told me all about you. I said, I don't know any woman in Nevada. How did she find out?
Right.
So she said, well, you know, they are all chatting about you in all the chat rooms. So that was the mistake they made. If they were smart, they would have, when they saw how I was fighting, because I published a book, I started the TV show, and I did this all within the first 2 years, they would have just given me the child back, and that would have just shut everything down. Mm-hmm. But now I'm a permanent activist. I will never stop.
Right. Now you can see how that would be hard for your child, though, for your daughter, right? This much attention, but maybe if Natasha jumps on board again and she sees someone her age and says maybe it's not uncool, because I think I've been an embarrassment to my family too, you know. What are you doing in this public access world, and 9/11 truth, just get on with your life.
They're in California, how do they?
Well, the internet, you know, or the cancer.
Your parents search the internet and see your stories?
We're only having 1 minute left. I just think that if you do the right thing, the support will be there eventually. It might not be there right away, but eventually it will be there.
I believe that too.
And so I want to thank all of you out there for joining me and Dyandria. And Dyandria, we'll have to have you back again.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you. So thank you for joining me. My name is Paula Gloria, and this has been an excursion farther down the rabbit hole. Thanks.
That was 28 minutes. You want to keep it?
Yeah, 28's fine. No, John's here. We're going to throw another chair on. Can we get another lag? And maybe don't come in quite so close.
Okay.
Oh, where is John? John Galino. Is John in the house?
Yeah, he was. Keep it on the same tape?
No, because we don't get 28 minutes on another tape.
What do you mean?
They chew up more time on that.
Oh, that's right. They only 45 minutes, right?
Is John Galino here?
Who's John Galino?